What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories, and they have a resident assistant. They make really bad decisions.
This is a group that they're going to need to win, by the way, talking about the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden ticket. Joe Biden has a video saying something similar, by the way, where he makes the point that he doesn't feel bad for the youth in this particular generation. Whatever you want to say about Sanders, he was able to rile up that demographic and get that demographic to come out. Perhaps not in the numbers that he needed in order to win, but he definitely was able to move and marshal a demographic that is often considered to be unreliable. Joe Biden choosing Kamala Harris is basically choosing somebody who is edgy without actually being edgy in any real terms, meaning she's performative. He puts a woman who's a person of color in that spot. But from the standpoint of giving anything real, there's nothing real that has been given. This has been an insufferable process over the course of several weeks where they basically dangled this choice out when the choice most likely had already been made. People have been having a bit of issues with this choice by Joe Biden. Now, I picked Kamala Harris going back months ago as the person that Joe Biden was going to pick because I thought he was going to pick somebody who was basically a black woman. And Kamala Harris had one of the highest profiles. No, she wasn't chosen by African Americans in the race. No, they didn't think that much of her. No, the youth didn't think that much of her. And basically, she had a crowd that Joe Biden was going to get in spades anyway. So people are wondering, why on earth would Joe Biden choose Kamala Harris? I'm going to give you the 4 key reasons of why. And I would say that these reasons make more sense than the drivel that you may be getting from other mainstream media sources that are trying to assert it's X or Y. I'm making a case that says this is the logical reasons why Joe Biden may choose a Kamala Harris. And I'm going to give you the positives and negatives, but I'm definitely going to give you the 4 reasons as to why I believe these are the reasons why Kamala Harris was chosen. Welcome to the Soapbox.
Smoked?
I have.
Okay.
And I inhaled. I did inhale.
Okay.
It was a long time ago.
Harris explains her
Now, this is Kamala Harris basically saying, I did inhale. I did smoke pot. And she's giggling. She's laughing about it. Now, what's wrong with that? If that was any other random person, I don't think that would matter one iota. The problem is that Kamala Harris is basically laughing and giggling as a prosecutor, meaning she was the person that was going to take people who were smoking a plant and ingesting it into their own body and believe that that was sufficient reason to put that person in a cage. So the person who is found under the law was putting people into cages and ripping away their freedom, not to mention the difficulty in regards to paying off the legal bills and those type of things, destroying lives, while giggling about the substance that she herself is talking about ingesting as she destroyed lives. When Obama got into office and he became a liberal pot-smoking president, because Obama used to smoke pot like insanely so, it is a slap in the face to be a pot smoker and then to get into office, to understand that the drug laws were made in order to go after blacks and hippies and to do nothing in real terms about it. Well, in this particular case, you have a prosecutor who put people in prison or put people in jail for pot in a cage, laughing about using that same substance. I don't like her. I find her to be utterly contemptible as in regards to a political person. By the same token, there are reasons that Joe Biden chose her that, depending upon what kind of campaign you're trying to run, may have a certain logic to it or may not. And I think that's what we're going to find out. Right now, Nate Silver gives Donald Trump 71-29. Now, if you're a Democrat, you might say, yes, I love those chances. By the same token, those were the exact same chances between Clinton and Trump. Meaning, they thought that Clinton was going to have 71% to Donald Trump's 29%. And we saw how that turned out. That is after the COVID-19. That is after all of the people dying from that illness. That is after 30 million people losing their jobs. And you still end up with a number like this. Be afraid. Be very afraid. And I would say you shouldn't take votes for granted. But that is not the way Clinton ran. And that is not the way Joe Biden is running. 4 reasons why Kamala Harris gets this position, despite not necessarily having the heft which she was running her campaign. Reason 1, she's a person of color that can be passed off as black. Now, what I mean by that is Clyburn made the argument that we can put to rest this notion that blacks are being taken advantage of by the Democratic Party, or Democrats take advantage of blacks. And you can do that because of Kamala Harris. That the choice of Kamala Harris makes that much clearer and that much more plain that Democrats aren't taking blacks for granted. Clyburn should be ashamed of himself. That's a shameless level of gaslighting to the African American community. Understand, if you are making the case to me that an Indian Jamaican woman is proof that the Democratic Party is not taking blacks for granted, I'm going to call you a shameless liar, because that's basically the opposite of what is actually true. As an African American in America, there are inequities that have to be clarified, or that have been clarified to the nation in the context of the COVID-19 thing. These inequities were there before COVID-19, but COVID-19 clarified them that much more. This is not just in depths of poverty or depths of inequalities between whites and blacks in regards to wealth, or for that matter, a society that perpetuates that particular wealth gap. You have blacks dying 5-1 or up to 3-1 in COVID-19 cases. It depends on where you are, where that number gets higher or gets lower. But you have a vast disproportionate number of African Americans that have been dying from COVID, or for that matter, exposed to COVID and have to deal with the medical bills and the weaknesses of the physical system after dealing with the virus. I'm making the point that the communities, the African Americans, some of which live in, that are violent and that have certain alienated perspectives of the world that they believe that originate from those particular violent environments, that are counterculture. Those things, again, are issues of poverty. I'm making the point, the very specific point, that if you're picking a person and you're saying that this identity is somehow emblematic of what the person is going to do in that office and is somehow emblematic of the policies that they're going to put forth, this notion that through implicit assumption of putting a person who is of a particular color or distribution in that office, that somehow correlates the policies that will directly and materially benefit the community. Now, the catch becomes, that's not what Biden is doing at all from the standpoint of trying to benefit the community. He's trying to pass off an Indian Jamaican woman as a reason and justification for the blacks, or for blacks to believe that this is enough and this is acceptable. That is a slap in the face. If you really want to get somebody who's going to deal with the inequities or deal with the fact of the black community, if you want to prove that the black community is not being taken advantage of, which they are, and which they incentivize by voting to the tune of like 90% for any random Democrat. But if the party really wanted to do that, the person who they chose, and Joe Biden himself, because that's the person at the top of the ticket, would have taken policies to ameliorate the rough edges. So yeah, they would back Medicare for all, because the overwhelming majority of the public supports it, and the fact that blacks are dying 5-1 in these high numbers and whatnot, it would deal with the inequities in healthcare in your society for people who are dirt poor. And whether that person is born in a trash can, they would still, because our society has evolved as such, get the same healthcare that anybody else would. Education, for example, infant mortality rates, getting rid of those violent communities by ensuring that those communities are not alienated. I'm making the point that the policies are the things that matter. Whether it's a blue alien, whether it's a trans, whatever, I'm making the point that whatever and whoever you put in that office is subordinate to what the policies are that the person is going to try to espouse and push for. And that matters far, far less than the candidate themselves. Because whatever you want to think, the candidate sets the agenda. Even though the vice president people a policy, and so it gives you an idea where the person's head is. Kamala Harris is a slap in the face to the black vote. And if you are willing to accept what is basically performative, theatrical trash in lieu of actual policy that will materially benefit your particular community, benefiting the community materially is the thing that you need to show you're not taking advantage of that community. This is the opposite of that. This is gaslighting to make you believe that a person and an identity is in and of itself enough. Obama, black, gave 95% of the income to the top 1%. His blackness in no way stopped him from doing it. Having a black grinning face into the public, though, does sell it to some degree, especially if you are in that particular community and you've got no real wins, and the identity in and of itself becomes somewhat enough. And that's a sad place to be in, because it should never be enough. It's not the identity, it's the policies, especially if you're talking about helping a community. Trump is running second point, Trump is running on law and order. And he's running on that because the lane had been open based on the protests, some of which turned into riots, but most of which were peaceful. But the way that the cops were responding, the way that the public pushed back on the cops and everything else, Donald Trump took the position, fine, I'm going to be the law and order guy, and I'm going to run on this notion of backing up the cops, backing up the policemen, law and order, etc. Joe Biden, who wants to keep a balance, because he wants the balance to be that nothing else unstabilizes the position, and that Trump drowns on his own failures, be it the COVID-19, or for that matter, be it the number of people that are in the streets protesting from either the Black Lives Matter movements or many of the other movements that sprung up, or for that matter, the chaos that ensues when all of these people get evicted or all of these people can't afford to pay for food and whatnot. Joe Biden wants all of that blamed on Trump. He does not want to add himself or instigate himself into anything that could give Trump some level of leverage or a pivot point in order to adjust the tenor of this election. Meaning, Joe Biden, like a boxer, wants to coast. He wants to be able to coast from here until the election, which is why Terry McAuliffe made the point that he's fine with Joe Biden being in his basement, because that allows Joe Biden to not say something that undermines his own campaign for presidency. So what does Joe Biden do? He's often remote. He's often in his basement. And with the polling of him so far ahead in many of these states, he believes anything that he does is only going to undermine his campaign. So he doesn't have to make an affirmative case for anything. He understands that's not why people are voting for him. And if he could get this much support, winning this much in regards to the polling, without doing anything, then he just doesn't do anything. Choosing Kamala Harris for his own tough on crime ticket, despite all of the people in Black Lives Matter screaming defund the police and many of these other organizations that sprung up across the country, white, black, gay, straight, everything in between, saying the one clear call, defund the police. And it's why he chooses Kamala Harris. Because not only do you get to be able to say, hey, here's a person of color thing, you also get to make the argument that blunts Trump's argument and undermines Trump's argument. If Trump is going to say that these guys hate the police and these guys are part of the left that is trying to tear down the statues and destroy America and everything else, and he's sitting here with a top cop, then it makes it difficult to make that argument, seeing as Joe Biden chose his own criminal justice ticket. But in doing this, it balances the equation once again, meaning there is no discontinuity. It's a parallel. And because it's a parallel, Donald Trump still has to deal with the problems that he has in general, because Biden, by choosing somebody like Harris, doesn't allow him to get attacked on criminal justice issues and on issues of Black Lives Matter and Antifa and stuff like that. That stuff pretty much goes away. I'm just pointing out why I think she was chosen. Part in color, yes. Part because she's a woman, yes. Part also because she was part of criminal justice, and it makes it that much more difficult to argue that Joe Biden's ticket is trying to destroy the police when she used to be a cop. And on top of that, Joe Biden is talking about giving more money to the cops. It blunts Donald Trump's attack. That's my point. It maintains a balance and an equilibrium in the position, not allowing Donald Trump to get some kind of imbalance where he can attack. The third point, 70% of the people who are voting for Joe Biden are doing so entirely for the sad, dispiriting reason soul sucking that he is not Donald Trump. Meaning, Joe Biden knows that. He knows that he doesn't necessarily have to do anything for the support that he's getting because the overwhelming majority of the people are doing so because he's not Trump. Joe Biden could be a ham sandwich. He could be a turkey sandwich. He could be day-old tuna. And people would still choose that over Donald Trump. He knows that. It's in his head. It's the reason why he can tell people go and vote for somebody else. The key here, though, is that this sad spectacle of affairs has Joe Biden, has people, 30 million people out of work, with at the same time Jeff Bezos trying to become a trillionaire, and his other people who are in his ilk having nearly $500 billion. No conversation is being made from the context of that is appalling. And not only is it appalling, it should not be allowed in a situation where you basically have corporations that can predatory behavior on the country itself. That shouldn't be that way, but people will accept it. People will see that this is the time where the arc of history is begging to be changed. And yet the best that you would get is a Joe Biden, and that Joe Biden will tell you in a heartbeat, go vote for somebody else. Well, those people will still stick with him. Whether he chose Kamala or anybody else, those people would have still stuck with Joe Biden because the reason they're voting for Joe Biden has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It has everything to do with Donald Trump. Which means that Joe Biden can choose Kamala Harris for other reasons than vote tallies or other reasons than what she can do for a crowd and ginning up a crowd, or for that matter, who it might alienate. He knows that the overwhelming majority of the people who are voting for him are doing so because of who he's not. And as such, that gives him a free hand to do what he wants. What are you going to do? Vote against them? You want Trump in? So if he doesn't back your policy, despite having 88% Democratic support or 70% Democratic support, or for that matter, being in the best interest of the public at this particular time because of the things that are taking place, he can still tell you to go and kick rocks. Because again, he's not making an affirmative case for why he should be in that office. His case is, I'm not Trump. Last but not least, his rationality or his rationale is justified by, let me say it this way. From a standpoint of bringing somebody in that's going to help me to alleviate some issue in our society, where I could say this person is going to help me with X and Y to alleviate this and to alleviate that. Well, this is not like that. This is somewhere where you have, because so many people are willing to basically give their support over to Joe Biden for nothing, well, you have, from a logical standpoint, that if I can win the presidency without giving anything real, why wouldn't I do that? Meaning, if I'm Joe Biden and I think I have a pathway to the presidency where I don't have to offer people anything because they're just so terrified of Donald Trump or they just want Trump out of that office that much, then the legitimacy of him taking an action like that is created just because of the opportunity in and of itself. Meaning, there doesn't need to be any cosmic thing to it. The very fact that the opportunity exists for him to win an election without giving anything in return for it legitimizes the point of view. He doesn't care about this other stuff that people care about in regards to getting things done. He wants to be president. And if he can get to be president because people are just sick of Trump, it is rational to take that path. As a politician, you have all sorts of people pulling on you constantly. And because you have all sorts of people pulling on you constantly, oftentimes the things that you offer to people are performative or theatrical. You don't want to give anything if you don't have to give anything. The reason why Democrats take blacks for granted is because they vote for them to the tune of 90-something%. If they thought that the black community, that they would lose 20% of the vote total, they will pay more attention because they would have to if they wanted to even have a chance at winning. The same thing is true for the left. And in this very specific case, the same thing is true for any group that is backing Biden entirely because of being terrified of Trump. At that point, the logic of it kind of writes itself. Why wouldn't he take advantage of those people that are terrified of Trump in order to win the election, especially when it allows him to do so without having to barter, trade, anything for it? You incentivize your own being taken advantage of, whether you're on the left, whether you're on the right. And you incentivize it by backing people who in no way backs your interests, while the same token may be giving you some kind of lip service as if they do. Until you get to the point where you stand under the banner of policy and you're willing to let them fail miserably, nothing changes. The logic of you have nowhere else to go, the logic of blue no matter who, the logic is that it allows the removal of all notions of accountability while simultaneously still talking in this kind of FDR language by moving far and fast to the right. If you want that to change, you can't keep doing the same thing. And fact of the matter is, as appalling as this is from the standpoint of any kind of democratic, representative, moral, ethical grounds of doing what is in the best interest of the public, something that you're philosophically bound to do, instead of that being the highest echelon of affairs, we basically have a legitimacy of a party to ignore what the public wants, understands that he is not getting in office, but making a case for what he's going to do in that office, gets it entirely that it is purely a placeholder in order to keep somebody else out, which allows him to basically do whatever he wants in that office, where the same argument is going to be made later on if he lives through it, or if it's Kamala Harris that's making it, you have nowhere else to go, blue no matter who, least worse, and the removal of all notions of accountability, thank you for the cash, and business as usual. If you want that to change, if you really do want Medicare for all and those other policies that you believe are in your best interests as a society collectively, then being and staying within the party structure is not the way to do it. I'm not saying avoid politics and just give away a vote or ignore or just holding a vote. No, I'm saying be very vocal and be very clear and very organized under this mantra that this is what we are willing to accept and nothing less. And being willing to allow them to lose if they are not willing to back policies that are in the best interest of the American public as voted by the American public. I leave this here. There are reasons. I guess my point is it's not a senseless vote. The vote for Kamala Harris from the standpoint of Joe Biden does make sense as it gives him certain benefits. By the same token, those benefits have nothing to do with policy. Those things have nothing to do with what is going to be in the best interest of the American public, what is going to push this country along, it's nothing that. It's all optics, theater, and just politics without any real substance. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. Thanks all.